today both have reason to give thanks to Boston. With us are Alice Ghostly, whose career was given an immeasurable boost by her rendition of Boston Begin, and Orson Bean, whose multifaceted success might be attributed in part to his Beantown education. And now, here's your man of the half hour, Skippy Lowe.
Orson Bean. Did you hear that accent? He is from Massachusetts. Believe me.
Is he?
Yes, that is David Carvet's.
Back you can have it, yeah.
Did you know that you and I have a lot in common?
Oh,
I must tell you.
Other than both being handsome fellows?
No. We have a lot in common in our careers.
All right.
I worked for Rocky Palladino at the Collegian.
Oh my
God! When I was only about 20, 21 maybe.
God.
And I understand you did a week there or something.
A week? I was there for quite a while.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it was a female impersonator
That's
show.
right, and I was an MC, but straight.
Yes, all right.
But,
but no, there was some straight acts on the bill.
Right.
But the boys with the feathers used to rap on my dressing room door and say, 5 minutes, Miss Bean. I said, get the hell out of here.
I worked that, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was a wonderful
And I worked
club.
for Johnny Sullivan and Paul Jordan and all those clubs around.
This was in the late 40s, and, you know, staid Boston, Massachusetts went crazy when these boys from the 181 Club in New York, which was a famous female impersonator.
Right.
The most famous one, except for Finocchio's in San Francisco.
It was in early 50s for me.
Oh, well,
it was
all
early
right.
50s.
But I broke it in. See, I was there in the beginning. And the Boston Brahmins, you know, these people were lined up around the corner to see these female impersonators with their feathers and their spangles. They loved it.
But are you from Massachusetts?
Indeed. I grew up in Cambridge.
Cambridge?
Yeah. I was born in Vermont.
Right.
I was born in a little town, a small town, a quiet town, a conservative town. Ask me, say to me, how conservative is this town?
As conservative as Bush?
This town is so conservative that when the local weirdos there take hallucinogenic drugs, they see the Lawrence Welk show.
Oh!
This little town, say to me, how small is this town?
How small is it? Howard Johnson's Carey one flavor? I got to get that in, guys.
This little town with a minuscule business district, this town has one yellow page.
That's funny.
Howard Johnson has one flavor. These jokes are like old friends, Skip.
They are, because I followed you at Lowe at the, I'll never forget it, with the banjo player. He was this very famous banjo player from Massachussets.
Oh,
what was
that
his
the
name?
guy?
Lowe, Massachusetts.
Yeah. I know.
And you were such a big hit.
Where was this?
In Lowe, Massachusetts.
Lowe, Mass.
But a club.
I worked the Latin Quarter in Fall River. That's big news. I'll never forget. Well, I suppose I will eventually. There was an ad in the paper, and there was a Greek guy that owned the club, and he used to book the acts with Johnny Sullivan, who was a booking agent in Boston.
I worked for him.
Over the phone.
Right.
So he says, "Oh, you're sending me this week." Johnny Sullivan says, "Orson Bean." He says, "Horse and a bean." And my ad in the Fall River Courier said, "Horse and bean." You know, people say, "Where's the animal?" I don't know. Horse and bean, and then so and so and her doves, and I guess there was a juggler, and then down at the bottom of the ad it said one-man band dancing 8 to 12.
Right.
I couldn't, but I had a thing on his head, and he was playing, and the couples would be up dancing.
But Orson, the name Orson Bean wasn't your name, because there was a stripper, and also there was a stripper I worked with, Val DeVal, a stripper, an exotic dancer.
But my Val DeVal was a piano player.
A piano player?
Yeah.
Well, the one I worked was Val DeVal, a stripper, and I thought it was the same. It isn't.
I remember her. Bountifully endowed by the Creator.
She gave your name. Val
Did
DeVal?
she?
No, you said.
No, Val DeVal did, but this was Val DeVal, the piano player. I had an opening act. I used to do a Harvard College act.
Right.
I had a crew cut, I had a gray flannel suit, a button-down shirt.
Very Brooks. I remember.
Very Brooks. And I would go out, and I was born with the name, Skip, Dallas Burroughs. Sounds like a name some fool named Orson Bean would make up and change his name to. But I would go out, and I had an opening line. I would say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dallas Burroughs, Harvard 48. Pause. Yale nothing." Well, you could hear crickets in the back of the car. Bring on the stripper.
Yeah, right.
So Val DeVal was the piano player in this club called Hurley's Log Cabin in Boston, and since defunct. And there was a four-piece band. Actually, it was a three-piece band, and the drummer was painted on the back wall. Some of the jokes that kept me out of the big money for a long time. So he says to me every night, you know, the whole act was laying an egg. I'm going down the toilet. And Valdeval says, your act is not playing, kid. I was only 20 years old. He says, because your opening joke doesn't work. He says, the reason for that is you don't have a funny name. Each night he made up a different funny name for me. One night he says, tell him your name is Roger Duck. So I go, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hurley's like, you know, good evening. It's time for the show. The music. Good evening. My name is Roger Duck. Harvard 48. Yale nothing. Crickets. Bring on the script. One night he made up the name Orson Bean.
Right.
I went out, Orson Bean, Harvard 48, got a big laugh, and the whole act played. I was elated. I ran back to my dressing room. Dressing room, a nail. It happened. There was a local Boston theatrical booking agent, worked for the Ford agency, a fat guy named Bozo Zimble. Came back, he says, you're great. He says, I got a full week's work for you in Montreal. I was all excited. I said, what's the money? He says, $75 less 10%, and you got to pay your own traveling expenses. I said, it'll cost me more than that to do it. He says, well, you got to save up for these jobs. That's how I became Orson Bean.
But Orson Bean went to New York and did the Blue Angel.
Yes, indeed.
And there's a lady started at the Blue Angel sitting next to you, Alice.
Where?
Alice Ghostly. Hello, Alice. I had to put you two together. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Now, it was the Bonsoir.
At the Bonsoir?
I started,
but you did... Oh,
I opened that before they even got a liquor license.
Did you
My
really?
partner and I, they had a wine and beer license.
But you did work the Blue Angel.
Yes. But it was after I had worked...
At the Bonsoir?
The Bonsoir, and it was after I was in New Faces that I worked.
They had no liquor license, but the customers said, I've seen the record, need a drink.
Yes, right. They quickly got it in.
New Faces really hit the thing for Alice Ghostly with Paul Lynn and all those great stars.
Eartha Kitt, Robert, Carey.
And Robert Clary. All those great stars from that show. Tell me about Ronnie Graham. And you all came back to the West after. I think Ronnie came here.
Well, eventually everybody did, I guess. I didn't move for quite a while until the early 70s.
I see, but you went into the show with the Bewitched.
Yes, but I still lived in New York when I did that. I used to go back and forth.
Did you really? Mm-hmm. How was it working on that show?
Wait a minute, did I or not? I get my dates mixed up. No, I guess I'd moved out here by then. At the beginning, when I did television, at the beginning, I used to go back and forth.
I got to ask you both. You both worked great. I think he's one of my favorite talk hosts. The one who cries all the time.
Oh, Jack Parr.
Jack Parr. You both were on that show.
Yes,
he had the most wonderful guests, like you two.
Oscar Levant.
Always.
And Alexander King.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Oh, yes.
He was really...
And his wife, the lady who tap danced and played the snare drum at the same time or something.
Yes.
Or sang and played the snare drum.
Why did he have such a wonderful guest?
Because he really... He didn't care that it was a show even.
Right.
He liked to sit and talk with interesting people. And the fact that they were
interested.
Yeah, the
he
fact
had
that
Mimi Hines and Phil Ford with the little Mimi Hines and all those great, wonderful people.
I think
he wasn't trying to score. He wasn't trying to be funnier than the people. He wasn't trying to, and as a result, he frequently was. But I mean, the point is, he really just genuinely enjoyed it. I believe he forgot the camera was on him and just started when he would get Alexander King's latest madness going, or Oscar Levant, you know, or Jack Douglas and Rayco was in another group.
I just had her on the show with Eartha Kitt.
Yes,
really?
Rayco. She lives in Palm Springs.
Is she still Japanese?
She's Kumbawa. Yeah. Listen, Alice Ghostly, where are you from originally?
Originally, well, I was born in Missouri, and I lived in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and then New York.
Where did Alice Ghostly came
the big
from,
time.
actually, when you really hit the big time?
What
actually, New York, was it?
Yeah.
Not Chicago. Usually people from Arkansas and Missouri usually go to Chicago and then New York. You didn't do that.
Only the nervous ones.
Is that what it is?
I just never thought of going any place but New York. As a matter of fact, I never thought I'd ever live in California.
Tell me about that show, New Faces.
Well, it was...
what an experience.
Yeah, well, you know what, to begin with, I wasn't in that show at the beginning. I mean,
but the opening
I opened it.
Yes, right.
I opened it. But he held a year and a half of backers auditions.
Right.
And Charlotte Rae was doing the part. Remember?
Yes.
You
right,
know
of
Charlotte?
course, yes.
Yeah. And one night, and I had auditioned, but I didn't get into it. They didn't need two comedians, so to speak. Anyway, so Abe Burrows came one night to one of the backers auditions and saw Charlotte and said, "You must be in my new musical," which was Three Wishes for Jamie.
Right.
So Charlotte went into that, and then he needed someone to do backers auditions. So that's really how I got into that show. And also, this friend of mine had written a song called Guess Who I Saw Today, which I had been doing at the Bonsoir. And he really wanted that song in the show. So he called me and he said, would you just go and audition the song? You know, so I said, all right.
Alice, what kind of people used to come into the Bonsoir?
What kind of people?
Yeah, what were the... They were ordinary.
They were very kind of high society people.
High society.
Yeah, by that we mean drug addicts.
Yes.
Child molesters. Pushers.
Heavy drinkers.
High society, heavy drinkers.
No,
how come you didn't wind up singing
the song? How come? That's right.
Well, I think the big decision was made that they wanted me not to do any kind of ballads. They wanted me to do funny numbers. Or the more serious things like Time for Tea, Nanty puts her hair up, things like that. Whatever. I'm sorry I didn't get to do it, but it's a good number.
Orson Beam, you have a new book out.
Where?
Too Much Is Not Enough.
Oh, there it is, yes.
Tell me about this new, exciting book of your life.
You're
out there telling everybody about your life. Tell me. Tell me about it.
I was born of normal parents on a small farm in Vermont. At an early age, I found a proclivity for chickens. That's not
Every time I think of Orson Beam, I think of Madison Avenue. Why do I do that?
I can't imagine.
I don't either. I just don't know. But do you know, also, I saw you in Promises, Promises, when I was in, I was doing RR in Australia. Sydney. Yeah, I was in Sydney at the time.
R&R? I
was entertaining the troops in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going back to Bangkok and Saigon and all those places. And I went to Australia and I did the RSL clubs.
Yes.
And I stayed there. And
well,
I was there for a year, and you were there.
Yeah.
Big. Promises.
And you did Promises.
I spent a year and a half in Australia.
Tell me about your year and a half in Australia. Well, what a boring place. Go ahead.
Really?
Boring for me.
No, I didn't think it was boring. Okay. Australia is a remnant of the British Empire where people who couldn't make it in India were sent. However, I had a wonderful experience over there. When I was doing Promises, it came time for Thanksgiving, and my family and I were very homesick for America at that point, and we called R&R headquarters, where the Vietnam soldiers would come over for a week or two to, recuperate from the fighting. And we said, send us a dozen boys for Thanksgiving dinner.
That's lovely.
And there were a lot of good-looking young women in the show, the dancers and the singers, and I invited a dozen of them to be my guests for an American Thanksgiving. And when the dozen boys showed up, they were greeted by Australian beauties clad in bikinis, because it's the middle of the summer in November.
Were there any American, all Australian entertainers on the show? Were you the only American in that Promises?
Yeah.
Because that's the law, isn't it? There was a thing there. Go ahead.
So anyway, then we went to the beach. Then we had turkey about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the management provided a dozen free seats, and they all came to see the show. And then they took the girls out afterwards if they wanted to, and at least one romance flourished out of it. A Marine named Kelly flew back 2 months later at his own expense when he had a weekend off, and took one of the girls out again, and all the others were very excited.
And they got married? Did they get married?
No, I think she wound up hating him. But anyway.
But you were in Melbourne at first.
Yeah.
That is a very, very conservative town. Melbourne is very Boston.
Melbourne is Boston.
Yes.
And Sydney is L.A.
That's right.
But the pubs were better in Melbourne. The pubs in Sydney.
10 o'clock they closed.
Yeah, that's true. But aside from but you learn to get drunk at 5 in the afternoon. The pubs used to close at 6. People would get off work at 5:30. They had a half an hour to get drunk. They'd run over, give me 17 drinks, mate. You'd line them up. So when they changed the law and the pubs could stay up until 10, which was quite radical, they just drank 10 times 17. They kept on at the same rate of 17 drinks set up at a time, but they did it instead of ending at 6, they ended at 10. It's a very drunken country over there. Even the kangaroos are sloshed over there.
Have you worked the Far East at all?
Never.
Never been out of the
I never have. I've been to London and Italy. But I've played London once on a television show.
I see.
Once.
What's Alice Ghostley doing nowadays? What's new and exciting in your life?
She's working over at Irma's House of Pain. That's a wonderful thing. The means to go in.
You look absolutely wonderful.
Well, thank you. That's very nice.
I've seen you perform a lot.
Yeah. And well, the latest thing I've been doing is Designing Women.
Wonderful show.
Which I like a lot.
Like the way God did it?
Yes.
Are you having fun in that show right now? Are you having fun in that show?
Yes, I've done it once this season so far. that's all I've done it. I hope to do it more.
New York. Back to New York, Alice. I don't know why I think of Alice Ghostly in Los Angeles. I just don't. Or Orson Bean, same thing. Because you're living in Venice now, I understand. Venice is okay. That's okay, I'll accept that.
Venice, you know, at least people walk out there. You know, in Beverly Hills, people get in their car to go to the bathroom.
See, I don't drive. That's why it's a little
We're New Yorkers. We don't
difficult for
drive.
me.
I don't either. Yeah, it's difficult.
Except
New
I
York.
do have my license.
Miss New York.
Do I miss it?
Yeah.
Not really. When I'm there, I love it. When I'm there working, I love it. And I was there for, about 2.5 years doing Annie. And I was in earlier to do another thing, which made it about 3 years that I was there.
I see.
And I loved it. But I really like
You do a lot of
living out
voiceovers,
here.
I understand, don't you?
Not a lot.
You don't?
No.
Alice Ghostly doesn't do a lot of voiceovers? I don't know why I think you would.
No, I don't really.
You do
Skippy.
commercials?
Not often.
How about you, Orson? Do you do any
All the
commercials?
time.
You do.
You're probably thinking of me. That was my
Is
question.
that your voice? Okay.
No, I do a lot of. That's the way I make my living these days. It's not. It's better than heavy lifting.
I love it. I mean, I would love to do it. I just
A
haven't.
lot of Broadway stars are here, like
Oh,
Robert
sure.
Morse, like Orson
Robert
Bean.
Morse does a lot of them,
They do a lot of voiceovers.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Alice Ghostly doesn't do it. because-
Well,
It's
I
only-
write letters.
It's only recently that women have really been used much in that field, which is a shame, but at least
Yeah.
it is finally
Yeah.
changing. But for a long time, it was very hard for women to break into that field.
Yeah, I
and it is
think
beginning
so,
to
yeah.
change now.
Married.
Damn it.
Married, children. You had a child who was born in Australia.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, tell
I
me,
do.
how many children do you have?
I have 4. I'm horny and careless.
That's good. Okay, fine. I hope you're protected. Please.
No, I have 4 wonderful kids, and I'm taking my second oldest out to dinner, third oldest out to dinner tonight because it's her birthday.
Oh, nice.
And my little Rue from Australia is now 17, and
So that's actually 70, around 71.
Yeah.
71.
Yeah, I owe him a trip back to Australia.
Yes.
To
I
see
was
where
there.
he was.
I was there in
Yeah,
70,
he was born
71.
in Sydney. He was conceived in Melbourne, as I recall, on a Sunday when the pubs are closed and there's very little other reason to leave the house. Right. So you stay home a lot.
Your grandfather, tell me. In the book, I was reading about your grandfather. I loved it. Tell me about your grandfather.
He's a wonderful old guy. He spent his entire life in New England, lived in Vermont all his life, and used to warn me against Southerners. He used to say, stay away from Hartford. It's a big laugh in White River Junction. She's laughing because I did that in another show. Nobody found it amusing. And then he said to me, what do you think about the recent election? I said, I think voting in that election is like telling a woman she can pick who's next at the gangbang. And you didn't like it much better than the other people did.
No, I did. Tell me something. Growing up as,
Anything.
as a
I can tell you, between Alice and me, I can answer any question.
Orson Bean, growing up as a child in
That's one of the ones Alice
Massachusetts.
answers.
I went growing up as a child and also in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
Vermont, wherever. I
Yeah.
think that's a wonderful place to grow up.
Sure it is, because who wants to be a kid there, so you grow up? No,
it's a great
No,
place.
I love New England.
I do too.
I have relatives all over there. My father still lives in Harvard Square, and I got cousins all over Massachusetts, and I have relatives in Vermont. My grandfather, wonderful old guy, was married to my grandmother for 60 years. She died, and he got married again at the age of 85. Yes, to
And
a
they
lady,
knew
85, who used to go with him before he married my grandmother. And she used to say, I got you, didn't I?
At the end. I love it. I think that's great. Isn't that wonderful? What sign are you, Alice?
Leo.
You're a Leo.
High seas rising.
What day is your birthday?
14th of August.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm July 22nd, so I'm either a crab or a lion, depending on what machine you put the penny in. You know, when you're born, right at the edge, you never know what to read in the paper. It says, you will have a miserable day. Do not invest in anything. Oh, and I look at the Leo.
The other one, it's fine.
Do you write your own material when you do? No,
I don't. I
also,
never
it's
have.
all special material. Everything's special. How about Alice Ghostly doing her one-woman show at the Cinegrill at the Roosevelt?
You know, I couldn't imagine doing that
Why?
at all. I don't know. I guess I'm not interested.
Really,
in doing
Alice?
it. I mean, I just think that would be. I think it would be the hardest work in the world.
But
and
you
I
did
think
it
that's
years ago
probably-
when you were at the Bonsoir
Yes,
and all
but
those.
that was-
Barbara Streisand started there. She was doing a show called I Get It Wholesale. I remember because I worked it too, and I was the MC at the time there, and she was doubling. And I can't imagine you not want to work in a club again.
She's too rich to work.
It's
The family doesn't want to work.
Shecky Green doesn't want to work either. He hates show business.
I said, well,
why? Go ahead, Alice.
I tell you, when I worked clubs, it wasn't, well, commercial, I suppose, is what everyone, it just was never a commercial act.
And little
and there would be no place to work anymore, really. Okay. There are no clubs like Bonsoir anymore.
Those times.
Any of those,
the Blue Angel, the Bonsoirs, those were chic, little, elegant little rooms. I understand what you're trying to say.
Nowadays, you go out and you talk about gorilla doo-doo or something. It ain't the same.
Yes. Are you going to be doing a one-man show?
Certainly not. I'm too rich to work myself. My financial advisors have informed me that if I earn any more in this fiscal quarter, I will no longer be eligible for food stamps.
Orson Beam, I love you.
I thought my tongue was hanging out.
How's this book doing, Orson Beam? I understand
wonderful. It's trying to win a 4th printing, and I'm going to retire on the proceeds of it.
Too much is not enough. What do you actually mean by that?
There was an old lady when I was a kid in the neighborhood. She used to say, too little is not enough, too much is not enough, enough is enough. I used to say, what does Mrs. Mendelssohn mean by this? And halfway through Thanksgiving dinner, I realized what she meant because I continued eating. And at the end, I said, too much is not enough. I had enough about 2 drumsticks ago.
You had some tough years towards the 60s, I think, later in the 60s. I don't know. I thought Orson Beam wanted to get away from it all. Something, you just disappeared. I think that's what you went to Australia, because I was too busy myself doing something.
That was 1970.
What? Tell me, Orson, what happened then?
Nothing. I just went over there, and I sat there for a year and a half, and I drank Foster's Lager and looked at the sunset over Sydney Harbor, contemplated my navel, and began to relax, and decided I was going to become an old hippie. I bought a book on Zen that said it's always now. It's now, and now it's now, and now it's now. It's all the same now. And the future it never comes. I mean, I can say to myself, what will I do tomorrow morning when I get up? What will I do then? But the time never comes, Skip, when I jump out of bed and say, at last, it's then.
That's right.
So once I figured out that it's always now, I didn't have to put any money aside for the future. I decided to cancel the insurance policies. If the house burns down, I would take it as a sign from God that it's time to move. And life insurance is a ripoff where I'm betting my hard-earned dough that I'll have the good fortune to get sick and die. So right away I could cut back about 40% of what I had to earn without even lowering my standard of living, because all that money was being put aside to send the kids to college. And I decided instead of the firm guarantee of going to Harvard, I would offer my children the memory of a contented father sitting around the house in his underwear with a can of Foster's Lager in his hand. And that's what they have to this day.
Well, I think you're right.
You know, he has the right philosophy of life, doesn't he?
I mean, think so.
Orson Beam has tasted life, and now he's come back to America. He has decided to write a book about it, what you have experienced in your life.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who don't have the right to write a book because they don't know what they're talking. But I feel that you too much is not enough. Is going to be a big hit. I really do, Skip. Because you have something to say there, and it's very sincere and it's from your heart.
Good.
And it's very. How about you, Alice Ghostley? Are you going to write?
I don't write.
You don't write.
Can't even write a decent letter. Oh, I can, but I just can't do it. Not very well.
Why does Phillies hang around you? Just the fact that you're beautiful and sexy?
He's a wonderful guy.
Do you go back to your childhood friends back in Missouri, where you're from? Or,
well, in Missouri, I was there very briefly.
Where are
I
you
was
actually?
Born in the train station there, in Eve, Missouri, which is no longer there.
Right.
They got rid of it.
But where are all your?
From Henrietta, Oklahoma, is where I went to high school, and I see some of the people now and then.
Would you say you have an accent of a Midwestern accent, Orson Beam?
Probably off and on.
No,
it is. No,
she has just a distinctive Alice Ghostley accent. It's not an accent.
The Alice Ghostley, Paul Lynn.
Yeah.
I knew him. I loved him. He was a very dear friend of mine till he died. Every time I think of Paul Lynn at the beginning of his career, he was doing Alice Ghostley. I don't care what you're going to sit there. He was actually doing you.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No,
well,
no.
Doing her and a number of her friends, as I recall.
I believe. I always thought Paul Lynn was personating Alice Ghostley, and he adored you.
I saw him more as Claudette Colbert.
Okay.
No, Paul and I, when we met,
Yes.
I mean, he's kind of the same sense of humor, perhaps, since
attitude. It's the same attitude.
He was the way he was, and I was the way I was.
Yeah, he was.
It was. I don't think it was. Of course, I lived with that more than he did, because he became a household word, as you know.
But he became bitter when he drank, Alice.
Bitter and hostile.
And hostile. Yeah. What made him do it? Because
some
he
people
was
just
such
can't drink.
He was a bad drunk. That's all.
Yeah.
He should have found AA and stopped drinking. But he was one of the genuinely funny people God ever put on.
He really was.
Exactly.
I remember one time on Hollywood Squares, the question was, what is a pullet? And he said, a little show of affection. I mean, that's
I know.
Yeah,
but he really had wonderful
He had a wit.
He did.
Quick. He was wonderful.
Yeah.
But he never.
He was from Ohio. He was originally from
Mount
Ohio.
Vernon, yes.
Yeah, he was in the show with you.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, he was working in a club called Spivey's Roof. Do you remember that?
Sure.
Yes.
When I met him,
yes.
And I was working at the Bonsoir, and Spivey's Roof.
Yes.
I remember it kind of had hit its last days. So when we went to see him, I went to see him with Murray Grandis, friend of mine, and there were 4 of us in the room.
That was the audience?
Yeah, we were the audience of Paul. Which in those days, I worked in places like the Fireside Inn, which was the first place, and there could be like 4 people there too. Always difficult.
I was doing a comedy magic audience participation.
Yes.
In a place called the Melody Lounge in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. 3 Big X3, front sat son, direct from Boston. And I go out there, and there is no one in the audience at all, and it's Christmas Eve, opening day. And I said to the boss, do we have to make the show? He said, I pay you make the show. A fat Portuguese guy. I went out, good evening, ladies and germs. There was nobody there. A couple came in. They sat down. By this time, I had introduced the dance team. They were out, and they were having an argument. And the muted tones of the couple's argument wafted through. Now, the magician went on, whatever. Now, I'm doing this comedy audience participation act, and I got to get somebody up on the stage or I can't do the act. And I look back, and the fat Portuguese guy is glowering at me. The guy's wife goes to the ladies' room. In desperation, I asked the only person sitting in the audience to come up, be my assistant. To my absolute astonishment, he came up. I'm doing a fake hypnotism act. I whisper in his ear, do what I tell you. The guy is falling down. He's clucking like a chicken. At a certain point, his wife comes out of the ladies' room, and seeing her husband up there with me, turns her chair around and faces the back of the club. I couldn't believe it. What a bizarre experience.
Oh, yeah.
Those were wonderful days, weren't they?
Oh,
you guys must have
to
lots
look back,
of
you laugh a lot, but they were